All right, boys and girls, we are back on another edition of the Big Ben Show. I'm your host, Ben Domenech. You can email us at bigben@fox.com. Follow me on Twitter at bdomenech, and you can subscribe to my newsletter, The Transom, at thetransom.com, to The Spectator at thespectator.com. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about this latest Superman movie, which has attracted the attention and the controversy of a lot of people online. I saw it myself on opening day with one of my friends who has gone to the New York Comic-Con on multiple occasions, dressed fully as Superman. I'm looking forward to his latest idea for an outfit, which I'm sure is going to be incredibly impressive. And we kind of hate-watched the movie. Now, I want to preface this by saying I am not anti-James Gunn, as many people online on the right have occupied that position for quite some time. I'm not in that category. In fact, I like almost all of his work, especially Guardians 2, which I think is one of the most really moving entries in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And actually, with Michael Rooker's death tragically in it, has one of the true emotional beats, which you don't find typically in a lot of those films because of the lack of stakes. I do like his work. I even like Peacemaker, which is his wackiest series, starring John Cena. And so because of that, I was not someone who went into this whole movie experience thinking that I was going to hate the movie. But the conversation in advance of it and the initial leaks around it really did preface the experience, which was, from my perspective, a complete CGI mishmash, abomination of a film that really failed to live up to the kind of epic nature that a Superman film ought to be. And all of the different Whedon-esque turns that James Gunn takes when it comes to dialogue just don't translate when it comes to a Superman movie. But I do want to talk about a dramatic choice that he made, one that I think is really significant in terms of what he did. And people have said before, not just me online, that James Gunn has some daddy issues. The way that he treated the fathers in this film was truly an abomination from my perspective. Superman's character is founded in the idea that he is this creature from an alien culture, an alien race, who comes to the United States, and it's specifically to the United States, to the Midwest, that he is raised by people of upstanding stock, and that because of that, he becomes a great American, not just this alien, not just as someone who is apart from everything that we have in our existence, but someone who is informed by salt of the earth people who built America and who continue to make America great. Instead, James Gunn robs him of both of those father situations, both the father in the alien culture and the father here at home. The father here at home essentially just endorses the aspect of his son's character that says being screwed up and being a stumbling human who is scared of things is just you being you, and you should just live your own truth, live out whatever you want to be, and you don't really have any obligations to anyone around you. And the father and the alien race, who is played weirdly by Bradley Cooper in James Gunn's film, has a completely different attitude toward Earth than any of the other dads that have existed, both in the comic book world and in the cinematic universes. For me, the ideal of this is still, of course, the original Jor-El, played by Marlon Brando. Cut one.
Even though you've been raised as a human being, you are not one of them. They can be a great people, Kal-El. They wish to be. They only lack the light to show the way. For this reason, above all, their capacity for good. I have sent them you, my only son.
There is an attitude towards this that is about obligation, about the idea that this is something where he is expected to have an inspirational effect on the people, on humanity. And that's something that is echoed by his father in other iterations of Superman as well. Cut 3.
Can I just keep pretending I'm your son?
You are my son. But somewhere out there, you've You have another father, too, who gave you another name. And he sent you here for a reason, Clark. And even if it takes you the rest of your life, you owe it to yourself to find out what that reason is.
That's, of course, Jonathan Kent, played by Kevin Costner in Man of Steel, a movie that I still defend as being an excellent and impressive edition of Superman, even if people didn't respond to it perhaps as well as the studio would have liked. I will point out that this latest iteration is running behind Man of Steel in terms of its box office when you adjust for inflation. And I think that Zack Snyder understood Superman and loves Superman a lot more than James Gunn does. Gunn has to turn Superman into something that he isn't. He has to turn him into somebody that's far more vulnerable. He calls himself a jerk at certain points. He just, is constantly being self-critical. He doesn't have the same type of attitude toward the role that he has to play for the people of Earth, one which was written in All-Star Superman and was echoed by Russell Crowe's Jor-El in Man of Steel. Cut 5.
You will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards. They will race behind you. They will stumble. They will fall. But in time, they will join you in the sun, Cal. In time, you will help them accomplish wonders.
When David Mamet was writing about Superman, he wrote, "Far from being invulnerable, Superman is the most vulnerable of beings because his childhood was destroyed. He can never reintegrate himself by returning to that home. It is gone. It is gone, and he is living among aliens to whom he cannot even reveal his rightful name." The story of Superman is one that's inspirational. It's also about becoming a human and becoming an American. It's about defending truth, justice, and the American way, something that DC has rushed away from and tried to discard for so many years, and yet we keep coming back to it. And there's one other element of this, something that I think we should appreciate or pause to recognize, which is the level of anti-Semitism that is in this film. Hassan Piker called it 2 hours and 10 minutes of F Israel. Sean King wrote on his Substack, "Outside of literally calling the two nations Israel and Palestine, it couldn't be any clearer." The dynamic politically that is set up within this film, and that has an actor who looks like David Ben-Gurion and sounds like Bibi Netanyahu, is framed as being an ally of the United States who buys a bunch of military weapons and the like, is something that I think is absolutely intentional and is designed by James Gunn to appeal to the online people who are in favor of backing Hamas and Gaza to the nth degree, who view America's work over there backing Israel as being something politically abhorrent. And I think that you can even see the layers of the film that seem to have been changed in order to make that be a front and center aspect of the storyline. But to be honest, the thing that actually offends me the most is not that politics, because, it's James Gunn. He's an idiot. But it's one of these things where Superman is such an iconic character because he means something to people as an inspirational role model. He's something that informs young boys about how to become a man. That's what the purpose of these superhero stories truly is. It's about the mythology and the legend that comes with these different figures, people who inspire you to greater things, okay? And whether that's Spider-Man or Superman or Batman or Iron Man, whatever, the point is it's about teaching young boys how to become men in a way that is responsible and inspirational. And instead of doing that this time around, James Gunn decided to just turn Superman into a doofus. So I guess they're going to reset the DCEU, and this is going to be the whole thing that they build around going forward. But for me, I'm washing my hands of it. I am not interested in this version of Superman because he isn't Superman. You're listening to The Big Ben Show. We'll be right back with more right after this. Happy to welcome to The Big Ben Show Senator Markwayne Mullin from the great state of Oklahoma. Thank you, Senator, for taking the time to join us in studio today. Appreciate it, especially on a vote-a-rama day when you've got a lot of work to do. I want to start off by asking you this question. You have been someone who has been a very, bold supporter of the Trump agenda and everything that he's been doing. I want to ask you how you think things are going. Are they going well? Are you happy with the level of success that you've had in terms of the Congress? Do you believe that you're delivering on his agenda?
That's a long question, but yes. I had a hard time switching from the House to the Senate because I was happy where I was at with the House. I had a very good shot of being able to run for leadership, and in fact, that was already in the works. I was on Intel, loved Intel. But my wife and we had a long discussion because we have 6 kids, and I actually do not want to be an empty nester. I like being a dad, and I like being a husband to my wife, and so being away from them hurts. And I was like, we want to be where we can be the most effective. I'm setting that as to answer your question by saying I wouldn't be here if I didn't think we were being effective. What keeps me here right now isn't the title because I care less about it. I'm actually my wife would call me a hermit. I had to be a people's person, but you'll never see me at a reception hanging out, ever. If I'm at a reception, it's because I'm speaking, turn around, and leaving. I like to be busy, but I'm okay being by myself. But the fact that we're being so dominant and winning right now is exciting to me. I think General George, who's a four-star general, outstanding individual. I mean, he's a soldier's general. I mean, he's a warrior. He said it best when we were going through some realignments, with DOD. He came in my office and I have a good relationship with him. He says, we have a once in a generation opportunity. I mean, this guy's ready to retire. He could retire anytime he wants to. He's 4-star, right? He's as we call in the cattle business, he's short and solid, and so he's ready to go. And he says what keeps me moving is we have a once in a generation opportunity to actually make real changes to America, and the Trump agenda is actually doing that. I mean, we're actually turning the curve. We've cut spending. I'm not trying to get on this political thing, but I mean, we have legitimately cut spending, not this 10-year projection. We're actually cutting spending today. I mean, last month, the Treasury actually brought in more money than it spent, right? The economy's turning. We're cutting the size of government. We're getting away from agencies. Instead of building agencies, we're cutting agencies. I'm sitting on approach bills. The approach bills isn't adding more report language. That we're not adding the size of programs. Every single agency is cutting the size of the agency. We're reducing the size of government. So I think the agenda is moving forward, and we don't fix this, Ben, overnight.
Yeah.
Right. This is way too big to fix overnight. Has to turn slowly, but for the first time. I mean, how long have you been in politics? You didn't have gray in your beard, I promise you. And I'm not even sure you had it. Did you have a beard?
I met Newt Gingrich when I was 12 years old.
Okay, so that tells you didn't have facial hair. And for the first time, actually, I'll say first time since Newt was Speaker. So that was 96?
94.
94,
95.
94, 95, right. So the first time since let's say 95, 96, we're actually pivoting and getting government starting working for the people again, and it excites me.
So you said something to me the very first time that I met you down in Oklahoma about how eager you are to get out of town. That you figured out the quickest way to the airport, right after the last vote, that kind of thing. So you're not someone who loves Washington and the swamp.
Concrete jungle is what I call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That swamp is very powerful.
Yeah.
And it drains a lot of people who come to it. Do you think that the difference between the first Trump term and this Trump term is how he has essentially approached the swamp and dealt with the fact that last time around he didn't really know how it was going to kind of come after him and drain him and throw all these roadblocks into his agenda, and this time he just knows better?
Yes, and his approach is different. So I think when President Trump first came into office, he didn't have a clue about politics, right?
And
same thing with me. Yeah. When I came to politics, I came straight out of the business world.
You came straight from business into it, and actually, you similarly motivated by frustrations.
100%. And so when you first get here, you kind of have a tendency to lose your way because it's so much different than business. And so when you first get up here, you think, okay, I've got to I've got to play this game. Because when you get into a new business, you got to be better at everybody at the business. And so you get into the political aspect of it, and you're whacking down fires, and you're chasing things that don't matter, and you're getting distracted, because that's what happens up here. You get distracted. In that first 4 years, he didn't know what he needed. He didn't know the personnel he needed around him. He didn't know how to navigate the halls. He didn't know where the bathrooms were. He didn't know where the tunnels were. He had no. He thought he was just going to come in here and like he's taking over another business.
Yeah,
it doesn't work quite that way. And so his approach this time is he's had 4 years to sit and think about how he's going to handle it different. And his approach now is he's not playing politics. He has thrown the politic playbook, threw it out the window, and he says, I'm doing it off relationships. Mm-hmm. And so he's got the right people, as he calls a central casting crew around him. He's built the right relationships in both chambers, and he's just blowing through. And he's not getting distracted. He's not playing whack-a-mole. He's not chasing every little bad story. He's staying focused on agenda, and he hasn't wavered.
So talk to me a little bit about that cast of characters, because I know that you know several of them personally and have for a while. Obviously, we're both friends with Tulsi Gabbard.
Right.
We both have known J.D. Vance, in certain contexts and that kind of thing.
Well, he gave me a hard time last night.
Oh, really?
Oh gosh.
What happened?
He had to cast the deciding vote last night, right?
Yep.
Well, I was also scheduled to be on Hannity. And so in between votes, I had to come to Hannity, and so when I get back, he's waiting on me because he has to cast the last vote. Right.
Yeah,
so he's waiting on me, and I came. Blowing in, and he was on the floor, and he just looked at me like this, and I said, man, I'm sorry, I was doing Hannity. Yeah, and he goes, yeah, I had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
He busted my chops for a while.
So these people.
Yeah.
How significant do you think it is that you now have a cast of people around the president who are in your generation, who are younger? Like the first time he came in, he brought in all these old folks who, gray hairs, who were, he thought of them as looking like the part, and,
right.
generals and people like that who he put into different roles. This time around, there is, it's a youth movement. Effectively, it's
right.
all these Xers and millennials who he brought in and put in significant positions. How much of a difference does that make?
Huge, because what he did is the first time he came in, he didn't know what he didn't know, so he handled it, as I said, Ben, in a business perspective. If you don't know your business, you bring people in that know the business. Yeah. So you got to surround yourself with people that know how to navigate the halls. This time he knew how to navigate the halls, and he brought in fresh meat, looking at it from a different perspective. That old guard is part of the problem. The old guard is what got us here. Yeah. So when he started bringing in Pete Hegseth, he started bringing in Ratcliffe, he started bringing in Tulsi Gabbard, he started bringing in Dan Driscoll. You could just go through the list, right? Bobby Kennedy, right? When he started bringing people that were outside the norm, if you're going to change D.C., you got to bring new people in that want change. And it was a resistance. He took a shot at trying to get the hardest one to get through. Secretary Hegseth.
Yeah.
And the old, theory around here is, wait, let's build up momentum and good faith before we get to the hard ones. Mm-hmm. The president and I sat down and talked about it, and he said, what do you think? And I said, man, just go for it. He goes, I agree. Let's just go for it. He said, if we can win this one, we can win them all. And I said, he said, you think Pete can do it? And I said, have you seen him? He hasn't backed down. All the stories that's coming about him, he's going right at it. His wife is walking the halls with him. I said, he's the perfect one to be the first one out the gate. Mm-hmm. And it set the tone. Literally, Hegseth's nomination set the tone for this administration, because he tackled it head on and said, bring it. Mm-hmm. Don't care. We're going to bring it. And this is the cast of characters that I'm putting around me. And all of them have a passion for change. And the media is losing their ever-loving mind over it because they can't wrap their hand around it. Because why? They're doing things different.
Talk to me a little bit about your evaluation of the Trump foreign policy in this second administration. To me, it seems pretty consistent. But there's all sorts of reporting that's out there, from all the different normal, characters that talk about internal fractiousness and disagreement and fighting. To be honest, I look at it and not to go back to the signal chats and stuff like that, but I actually looked at that as being a really intelligent conversation between people who had differences of opinion, but those differences were not so great as to indicate, some kind of
Fraction.
fractiousness. It was more like, okay, this person's on this end, and this person's on the other end. They're having a conversation. I mean, this is the kind of thing that my friend group, has around, dinner with a steak, kind of thing, about what we should do. What is your take on their approach to foreign policy?
We can talk about that signal chat, right? It showed that they were open enough to be able to talk like that with the vice president, with Tulsi, with the SecDath, with everybody that was in there making that consideration, and yet there was no discourse. It was just an opinion made, decision made, move forward. That's the way this administration, operates. They operate in a very open, transparent way. But talk about his foreign approach. There's two different approaches, right? You have the story that the media talks about that's going on in the administration. I can tell you, I talk to the administration every single day. I talked to JD yesterday. I talked to the president yesterday. I talked to probably 2 or 3 different secretaries yesterday, and they all are walking different. They're all walking different directions, but they're all centrally located. They dispatch, right? They have this cabinet meeting, and then they go out their different ways and go take. But they're all working somewhat in the same direction. But what you really need to look at is the way he's being received around the world. The best thing that happened to Trump 45 versus Trump 47 is the world got a taste of 46. And they hated it.
Yep.
They realized the hole that is left when the United States doesn't lead.
Wandering away from the picture.
Yes, and when the United States isn't leading, what happens around the world? And so world leaders were clamoring for, quote, daddy to come back, right? And I met with the Secretary of NATO, had dinner with him the other night, and he was serious about the word. He said, we need a leader that's going to lead. Otherwise, you have a NATO body that you have a bunch of different fractions. We have one person that people look at and respect from a strength perspective, not fear. Strength. There's a different things. People fear Putin because he's not reliable. He talks about nuclear weapons all the time. People respect strength because you had the ability to do it, but you don't do it, but you do mean the clock. When you put a 60-day window on, that means at 12:01 on the 61st day, hell's going to rain down on you. When this 50-day window, everybody's noticed what's happening that he put with Putin. Okay, something will happen within the next 51 days. So foreign affairs, we're in the best position we've ever been. I talk to foreign leaders all over the world on a weekly basis, and they are excited about America being back.
It does significantly. It feels like there's been a significant change in terms of their attitude toward the United States, particularly when it comes to them meeting their obligations in terms of all of these commitments that they've made in the past that they haven't lived up to. Talk to me a little bit about the situation in Oklahoma. You, when I went down there and visited
my
you,
wife
and your
just can't
lovely...
leave me alone. I try to get away from her. That's why we keep having 6 kids. I mean, it takes away all my time.
I loved visiting you and your lovely ranch down there. Obviously, though, there are challenges for Oklahoma in terms of economic, in terms of the burden of fentanyl and everything else that's happened over the past several years that has hit a lot of the American West and Midwest. Talk to me a little bit about the kind of improvements that you think people are going to be able to see under the policy changes that are happening. Not just the big beautiful bill and everything else that went along with that, but under the Trump administration that are going to affect the people of your state.
Well, let's just talk about blue states. We talk about Oklahoma too, but I'm going to say all blue states. What's happened with blue states is people are leaving the woke movement and moving to red states like Oklahoma. So we're able to build things again in America. Now, so when the manufacturing companies are coming back, be it smelting plants or chip plants, or DOD facilities that are in the industry, or trinkets for Walmart shelves. They're not building those plants where they've typically built them in populated areas in the East Coast and West Coast because it's the cost of business and the unreliable state to which they find themselves in. They're not wanting to go there. So Oklahoma has received a unbelievable amount of influx in manufacturing jobs, from pharmaceuticals to literally smelting plants, to the world's largest, or the Northern Hemisphere's largest paper plant, because of the friendly environment it brings. Well, for a guy that lives out in the middle of nowhere, and then you go left and go another mile, and then you get to my place, you want an opportunity for your kids to be able to make a living there, and not just get by, not just scrape by, but make a living. The average household income in Oklahoma when I first got in office 12 years ago, was $37,000 household income. That has increased. That has increased to over 50,000 now, and people say, "Holy smokes!" Well, our cost of living versus the East Coast is much, much different, right? Yeah. But it's continuing to grow every single day, and this administration has put it on steroids. So what we're seeing is that people that was having to leave communities like Adair County, they're able to stay there because the investments is happening all around us, and so our kids don't have to leave home anymore. So our small towns that were dying, they're able to thrive again. Not necessarily because downtown's coming alive again. It's because they're able to drive 20 miles, which 20 miles in Oklahoma means 20 minutes. Yeah. 20 miles here means anywhere between 45 minutes and 3 hours, right? But they're able to drive and come back and stay right there in their own communities. So it's huge. I mean, it's huge. But I got a question for you, okay?
Sure.
I'm starting in a dark room with a guy that has literally, it looks like an axe murderer tattoo on your forearm. You got to explain that one to me.
Oh, this is a chef's knife. This is my favorite chef's knife. It is this is a shun. Shun is a Japanese knife. Shun means season, so it has the meaning of food having its proper season, but also a proper season in life. So time to live, time to love, time to die, time to time
for everything, like in Ecclesiastics.
Exactly.
So, but you might want to explain that, because you look nice and gentle, just like a serial murderer, and you have a knife down your forearm. I'm just saying that it's kind of like it made me uncomfortable.
This is what I use to make food for my daughters. So
do you still cook a lot?
Yeah, I do. In fact, actually, do you have a store, you have a shop that your family owns, a restaurant that is quite popular, and I was curious, do you play any role in the actual recipe making, or is that your wife?
No.
Is that somebody else?
So actually, we just sold that.
You just sold it? Okay.
So we sold. We had a couple.
It's very popular.
Yeah, very popular. Yeah. We had a couple restaurants, and we sold them. We sold them a couple of steakhouses just recently. Best move we've ever made.
Really?
The restaurant business. God bless those that are in the restaurant business, but that hospitality business is full time with low margins. Yep. I'm used to companies that have higher margins. Working off of 2% and 3% margins is not where I think is time well spent, and scale is where that business is. But my wife is the cook. Now, what's interesting is all three of my boys are cooks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they can really cook. Like, I'm surprised. They're all three in college, and they all three have, they all live on their own.
What do they make? What's their specialty?
Yesterday, my son was sending me pictures. He's making jambalaya. Is that what it is? And some other stuff. I mean, and I didn't know he could make it. He's making hush puppies. He's sending me all kinds of pictures. I was like, holy crap! But we are not vegetarians in my family.
No, and so and that's very clear.
Lots of protein.
Lots of protein in that household.
But my wife, they'll call my wife all the time and say, "Hey, how do you make this recipe? How do you make this way?" Because she's a phenomenal cook. I mean, she can cook. So all the recipes in the restaurant came from her from our travels around the world. So she would bring time, and she wanted to bring it to our hometown.
And then you come up here and you eat Spam.
I do. I eat Spam and eggs. That's the only thing I cook in my kitchen up here is Spam and eggs. This morning and last night I had cereal for dinner and breakfast. Yes.
Well,
I'm good with it. I'm not complaining.
It's fine. No. I want to ask you about the situation as it relates to women navigating these issues related to Title IX and sports. Yeah. I know it's something that you pay attention to from your own background and from your family's
Tulsi
background.
Gabbard and I started working on this back in 2018.
Yeah, you were ahead of the curve in terms of recognizing how significant it was going to be. What needs to happen in terms of a policy standpoint within the Congress to make sure that these moves that are currently being made in the admin, executive orders and the like, have some permanence to them and aren't just kind of a thing where, okay, the trans movement sort of within, sticking men and girl sports, it's just going to go underwater for a little while, and then we're going to come right back up when there's a Democrat back in the White House.
So I'll go back to 2018. When I first brought this up, my wife was working with USA Girls Wrestling. I was working with USA Wrestling, and wrestling is a big sport.
And you should, you should share the level of wrestling activity that you have.
I got one boy that wrestles at Oklahoma, or two boys that wrestle at Oklahoma State, one that wrestles at University of Oklahoma, and then all three of my girls wrestle. So in our family, you wrestle and like it or wrestle and don't, but choose your attitude. We're vertically challenged. So I am 5'9" and barely over 5'9", and so none of my kids are going to play basketball, and football's not going to pay for your college, or wrestling would. And my wife was a gymnast, so there you go. But when I started working on it, it was apparent that this was going to be an issue. At that time, it was just in track. It wasn't in any combative sports. But I got pushback from USA Wrestling at the time, and I was like, "Listen, you guys are going to have to take this on. This isn't an anti-LGBTQ. I'm not trying to make fun of it. I just can't remember all the letters." Yeah. This isn't a thing on them. Go live your life however you want to live it. But fair is fair. And then I have three girls that want to play sports too, and it became apparent, right? This is going to become an issue. And what I was saying is that you don't want DC to try to just fix this. The movement has to come from women's sports. Fortunately, Riley Gaines came out and she made the difference. She's the one that actually started saying, okay, it's okay for women to speak out about this, but it takes a backbone to do that. You saw how ridiculous it was that she was getting just lambasted.
The backlash was enormous in the early going. Yeah.
But that's what's going to take. It's the women in those sports are going to have to stand up more and more, and they're doing it more often now. But now the movement has to move to Washington, D.C. to actually have sound policy, not executive orders. They're going to have to come to D.C., just like any lobbying group, and help us lead the charge.
Well, one of the things that we've seen, and I've talked to Sage Steele about this on this program and to others as well, is that there is clearly a backlash to this, and one that is organic. It's not just Republicans, it's not just activists. It's clearly that there are parents who are very frustrated with seeing a situation where their daughter spends years devoting her life and their resources and everything else to pursuing a sport,
right.
And then they end up on a platform where there's a guy standing at the top and they're in second or third, just because of the fact that this type of ridiculous policy is in place.
It's also what happens in the stands too, and I mean this sincerely, right? I go to wrestling tournaments almost every weekend. That's what I do, right? And I coach. I don't coach as much now because my kids are getting older, which is really difficult to sit in the stands and watch it. But
because you have opinions.
Yeah, I have opinions. Well, and I coached them forever. Yeah. But to see my girls compete is different than seeing my boys compete. My boys compete, I could be pretty chill by it to some degree. My daughters, I'm on a different level. I don't know why, because I'm daddy, I guess, wanting to protect them.
I know.
but we've run into situations where there's been high school kids, boys, that have transitioned and they're wrestling in girls, and that doesn't happen in Oklahoma. But when you're wrestling around in other states, it sometimes happens. And I mean, the stands, they get ugly. I mean, it gets really ugly.
Really.
And
what happens?
The fans start booing and start getting upset. Well, you think about a daddy, right? I'm a dad. Yeah. My daughter's wrestling against a boy, and God forbid that boy hurts my daughter.
Yeah.
And then I say something, and that boy's dad says something to me.
Yeah. That's a bad situation.
Zero chance that guy chooses food. Yeah. Right. You know what I'm talking about? Because I'm going to lose it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know I will. And because I'm protecting my daughter. That's a totally different story than road rage.
Totally.
Right. This is my daughter that had just got hurt because your son shouldn't be competing in a girl's sport.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened that I know of yet, but it could happen, and it will happen.
It
I
will.
guarantee you it will happen.
It will happen.
My daughter, when she was like 10 years old, she was wrestling in Missouri. And she's wrestling a boy, which is fine, right? They're younger at that time. And and I have, younger kids wrestling in male, female. Honestly, the girl actually has more advantage because they mature faster, right?
Yeah.
And but the dad hollered at his son because my daughter was winning and said, "Break her arm." I did not handle that well. Right? I didn't handle that well. I was in the corner, and I know parents.
This is one of those, and you may get this too from your wife. But my wife, whenever there's a situation that is like this, she's immediately paranoid about. Don't make a scene. There's somebody going to film you.
The problem is I was in the corner. I was coaching, and this guy happened to be about the distance away from this because it's a small mat from this room that we're in. And I did lose it. I jumped up, and other people heard it too. The ref stopped the match as soon as he said it, but I jumped up, and before I knew it, I was in the dad's face, the coach's face. Yeah. Once again, I didn't handle that right, but you just told your son to break my daughter's arm.
Yeah, you just told
because he was losing.
Yes.
And I informed him that his arm also was going to be broke, right? And my wife is up top because it was a gymnasium. She's filming.
For those of you listening who don't know what Markwayne Mullin looks like, that was not an idle threat.
Yeah, so I jumped. I didn't handle it very good. I was in dad mode, and so my wife though she's upstairs filming it, looking down. She's on it was a gymnasium. And afterwards, she came over and she said, "Markwayne, you need to watch this. Your wife." And she showed it to me, and she says, "You're going to end up on CNN."
Yep.
And so from that
same thing with me.
so from that point on, I didn't coach without filming the same time.
That's actually smart. Yeah,
because I knew
right,
my voice was going to be on it.
Yep.
But that's what when I go back to it and say that's going to happen and it will escalate if it doesn't. There's more than just girls competing against biological men. It's what happens with the fan base too.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets out of hand because it's unfair.
Yeah.
Especially in combative sports. You're not competing on a level playing field. This year, the in the 400, the 230th, I don't remember the actual number, but it was 230 something. Fastest male in high school was equal to the fastest female in high school in the nation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that's in high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just in the 400 meters. You just that you can't. There just is a difference.
Yeah.
There is a difference.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you were early to this.
Tulsi was too.
Yeah,
Tulsi Gabbard was there with me whole time.
I know we have you've been generous with your time. I'm going to have to let you go, but last question for you. I think that when it comes to the situation that Republicans are in the U.S. Senate, having this narrow margin and everything else that comes with that, obviously you go and do a midterm cycle, and people think that the things are going to go against you. But it's also a situation where you've got a pretty good map. How hopeful are you that this is going to be a situation where Republicans can buck the historical trend and hold on to, you've been a House member yourself, but hold on to both bodies of Congress, just given how much that has import for how effective the president can be in the last 2 years of his administration?
If we continue to move forward, even though we're having our hiccups, we have challenging times, but we seem to always get over the hump. We have those that are going to vote no. You have your Rand Pauls and your Thomas Masseys that are just they're going to oppose anything that comes out there. You have those challenges. That's okay. But we continue to deliver over and over for the American people. I don't know if you saw the interview that the co-founder of Home Depot had.
I did. Yeah.
Okay, and he was an anti-Trumper. I mean, he was not, and he's saying that people in his stores have a pep in their step, that he's optimistic, that the country's optimistic, and you want to see a good snapshot of honestly America, that's at a Home Depot. That's at a Lowe's. That's I mean, really, you got the gardeners there. You got Subarus parked in the parking lot, and you got F-350s parked in the parking lot, right?
Yes, you do.
And there's a big difference between the people who drive those.
Definitely.
Yeah, but at the same time, he's got a good snapshot of what the American people are feeling. Mm-hmm. So I think we have a really good opportunity if we're able to continue to keep politics out of it. When you start thinking politics, you start putting decisions of a political mindset that's making you make political decisions over delivering for the American people, you're going to lose. Mm-hmm. You play politics. That's what's happening to the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party can't govern, and they can't get out of their way because their base, they're trying to pander to their base.
Are you scared of these socialists?
In which way?
Just in the sense that they seem to be on the rise within that party. Do you think that? I mean, are you concerned at all that that's going to become an actual? I mean, we've lived through the last 30 years of not having, sort of something that was truly radical within the Democratic Party take reins.
I think that's a great question, Ben. If we would have lost the presidential election, it would have scared me to death because I think the country would have went totally socialism. We would have went down a European style government at that point. We would have been in trouble because the American people and younger people and the minorities of all different nationalities, they saw it and turned. That gave me so much hope for the American people that doesn't scare me anymore. But we can't let our eyes off of it. Remember, Reagan dealt with this too. Yeah. Reagan and Hollywood had to fight this back underneath Jimmy Carter. It wasn't as relevant as it is now, but we did this before. We made this turn in the 80s, and we're making the turn today by people are waking up. You see that the Democrat Party is what was the word that I heard yesterday? The Democrat Party is more. Jeffrey Epstein is more popular than the Democrat Party. That's what, and I forget what Democrat said this. It was a Democrat analyst on CNN that said that, and he's not wrong because the America population isn't where the American campuses are at. And so it did scare me, but not anymore. I think it's awesome. We can make this turn though, Ben. I think we can hold on and keep it at the midterm if we don't allow the political year to get away from us. Mm-hmm. If like we have happened so many times in Washington, D.C., you have 1 year to deliver, and then you have your political year to play politics. Yep. If the Republican Party starts playing politics after September, which usually happens October 1st, then we'll lose the midterms. If we continue to keep our foot down and continue to fight for the American people, then we'll have a good midterm.
You've reminded me of one of my favorite old Reagan quotes when he was governor. I had a nightmare last night. I dreamed I ran a laundromat in Berkeley. Markwayne Mullin, thank you so much for taking the time to join the Big Ben Show. Great to have you on.
Thanks.
Happy to be joined on the Big Ben Show by Chad Pergram. And I want you to know, Chad, that I'm such a big fan of yours and the way that you cover Washington. I know that you have been paying attention to all the different things that are going on Capitol Hill today. Talk to me a little bit about the vote-a-rama that's going to be scheduled here and that's going on and what your expectations are for it.
Well, the main thing here, what they're trying to do is pass this rescissions bill. This is a spending clawback bill. Rescissions is a hard word to pronounce and also a hard word to spell, but think of rescinding money. So Congress approved this money back in March for the entire federal government. And under the Budget Control Act of 1974, the administration can send a request to Capitol Hill to say, we ask you to rescind some of that money. And that's basically what they're doing now. So this passed the House of Representatives. It was $9.4 billion then, mostly for foreign aid, the USAID, and also the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The Senate finally was able to get onto the bill last night. They needed Vice President Vance to break a tie. There were 3 Republican senators who voted no. I always say it's about the math, so they went to 50-50. You had Susan Collins, the chair of the Appropriations Committee, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Mitch McConnell, the former Senate Majority Leader. So they had to bring in Vice President Vance to break the tie. And now under these rules, they've really not done a rescissions plan like this since the early 1990s, 1993 under President Clinton. And so they will have this vote-a-rama. It's very similar to the vote-a-rama where they take a vote after vote after vote like they did a few weeks ago in the big, beautiful bill. and then they will go to final passage. So we think sometime tonight they will pass. Now this is down to $9 billion. They had to trim out $400 million for PEPFAR. That's the global AIDS program, because there were some Republican senators who didn't like that cut. And so at the end of the day, they will pass that. But then you have the House and Senate out of alignment. So you have to bounce it back to the House. And House Speaker Mike Johnson had indicated that he wanted a bill that mirrored pretty much what they did in the House. We'll see if that passes muster with some conservatives. They probably don't like the fact that they've trimmed this down. And keep in mind, here's the other big thing. Republicans have talked so much about cutting spending. This is now down to $9 billion. That is an absolute drop in the bucket of the federal ocean. And it's been a challenge to do this. It passed by one vote in the House back in June. They need Vance in the Senate. They probably need him later today to pass the bill, and we'll see if they can line up in the House. And they have to do this by Friday under the Budget Control Act. They basically have a 60-day window, and so they have to get this done by Friday night at the latest. Otherwise, this goes poof, Ben.
This is a real test, I think, of how willing the Republicans are going to be going forward to continue any kind of actual fiscal responsibility. I mean, that seems to be a pretty rare breed. We talk about fiscal hawks, here on Capitol Hill, but that seems to be a dying breed in terms of the actual representation in the Congress.
Yeah, and it was funny. I was just on with Stuart Varney on Fox Business a couple of minutes ago, and he asked me, he said, why was this so hard to at least start on the bill? They don't like to cut. They like to talk about cutting. Nobody likes to cut their program. Here's a case study in this. We talk about public broadcasting. Mike Rounds is a Republican senator from South Dakota. He was very opposed to this bill at one point because of what it did to tribal public broadcasters in his state. Not necessarily NPR and stuff like that, but the idea that in these rural areas in South Dakota, and Lisa Murkowski, frankly, has the same problem in Alaska, where you have stations up there, that is the only means of communication. There is no grid, where the phones work sometimes and things like that. I've heard it described sometimes, been in Alaska, some of these public radio stations, it's not, you don't listen to All Things Considered and Morning Edition and things like that. It's like somebody says, Jim, the plane will be in on Friday. Yeah, literally stuff like that, because they're flying out to some, island in the Aleutian chain or something. It's a very different means of communication.
Mm-hmm. When you evaluate the way that this sort of has come to head in the last couple of months on Capitol Hill, obviously you're looking at two leaders in Mike Johnson and John Thune who have not had to shepherd anything of this size before through this process. What's your grade on how they did? And do you think that this is, a situation where, they had to cash any chits in or something like that to get something across the finish line? What was their approach, and how was it different than leaders of the past?
Well, I think Mike Johnson certainly had an advantage in the House with President Trump. He is the best whip in Congress. And you had, the typical folks, the fold caucus, as sometimes they're referred to, who make a lot of noise. And they certainly did on the big, beautiful bill, going up to the end. Andy Harris, who's the chairman of the Freedom Caucus from Maryland, Keith Self of Texas, Chip Roy of Texas as well. And that's why, that bill was delayed for so long in the House of Representatives going up to the final vote. There were some procedural things they had to get through that otherwise maybe would have taken 2 or 3 hours. Instead, it took about 12 to 15, frankly. But at the end of the day, they voted for the bill. So Mike Johnson, and I wrote a blog about this about a month ago, talking about Mike Johnson, again, to give, credit here to President Trump, because, again, this group of Republicans is generally willing to do what he wants them to do. But Mike Johnson passing these bills with this narrow majority over and over again is almost, dare I say, Pelosi-esque. That was the calling card of Nancy Pelosi when she was the Speaker of the House. She had bigger majorities sometimes, but was able to get people in line. I mean, she was not relying necessarily on President Obama. She did it herself. But Mike Johnson here, he has the advantage that you have a Republican conference in the House that's much more aligned with President Trump. I asked Johnson the other day, I said, what if you can't get this bill back through the House by Friday, the rescissions bill, after they make the changes in the Senate? He said, don't bet against me. And he's right so far. Mm-hmm. Now to John Thune. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so John Thune, it's been a little bit different. He has a little bit of a cushion there. 53 votes, but he has the usual suspects. Murkowski and Collins often have, problems with some of these more conservative bills. Murkowski and Collins both said, the rescissions request, because it's a request from the Office of Management and Budget, was not as specific as they would like it to be, and said that made it very hard to determine to support the bill. Even Roger Wicker, the chair of the Armed Services Committee from Mississippi, said the same thing. He said, I need more detail if we're going to do this again. But generally, he's been able to get the votes. You don't get style points if you, get all 53 votes or something. If you need Vice President Vance, you get him there. Two things were said to me in recent days. Now, Mitch McConnell, there were questions about the big, beautiful bill there. He voted for that. He opposed Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary. And I had one Republican senator saying that they were getting a little bit tired of McConnell not being a team player, when for years and decades he was the Republican leader in the Senate and would go into the lunches and the caucus meetings, conference meetings that they would have and say, I need everybody to be a team player. And now he's not on some major issues. I think Mitch McConnell sort of feels liberated here, not being in leadership. I mean, your role is different in leadership, fine. So that's one thing we're seeing. The other thing that I heard, the term that was used on me, is Murkowski fatigue. The idea that she's always looking for something. They got her to vote for the last bill because they gave her something on rural hospitals. They did not give her something on public broadcasters in this bill. And so she's a no. But again, you have to, appease those folks. It's almost like Murkowski is the Joe Manchin of this Congress, kind of, who was always the holdout and may be in play. They gave her something last time, but not necessarily this time.
Let me ask you about the senator who lost out to John Thune in that leadership contest, John Cornyn from Texas. He is the one senator now with Tom Tillis retiring who is viewed as being in a difficult position given the primary challenge that he has from Ken Paxton. Obviously, there's been some news there as well in terms of developments. How much concern is there about his situation, just given the polling that's come out about it? And do you believe any of these rumors that Paxton could get kind of parachuted out into the administration in some role to prevent that costly primary?
I think that they are worried about internecine warfare inside the Republican Party. I think it's very natural at this stage of the second President Trump term to have those types of infighting. You always have this, but it hasn't developed yet because they weren't established. Now you have kind of natural infighting. I was struck by the fact that, Cornyn always says if Paxton is the nominee, then you risk, flipping this seat maybe to the Democrats. I mean, you've had people like Beto O'Rourke run and do very well in Texas, but not, be able to, kind of go over the edge. But that has gotten people's attention in Texas. It is a red state, but there are pockets of blue, and you have lots of big cities with a lot of urban voters and Latino voters. And again, there was a shift in the MAGA coalition with some of them voting for President Trump last time around, but you wonder with the immigration policies, does that hold? And so I think they are concerned about that if they were to nominate somebody who is too conservative. Certainly if President Trump were to weigh in on that race, that would make a big deal. I was struck by when Cornyn, announced his campaign team and what he was going to do. Somebody talked about it was just a little bit too much by half, and said they're scared, aren't they? Meaning that they could tell by reading between the tea leaves. This is somebody who understands campaigns pretty well. I was struck by the other day after the divorce, information came out about Paxton, kind of this messy divorce here, that the NRSC, the national organization in charge of electing Republicans to the Senate, came out and put out a statement on behalf of Senator Cornyn. So, these types of things do get messy, and this is probably the messiest contest on the Republican side of the aisle, and might be one of the messiest races we see, period, in the 2026 campaign on either side.
I want to ask you about the mood on Capitol Hill regarding the president's immigration policies. We've obviously seen the backlash that's played out in different pockets across the country to these different things. But I'm curious if you think that the attitude is basically this chaos that Democrats or that people who are anti-ICE protesters or the like are participating in is something that actually accrues to Republicans' benefit. Do they believe that this is a situation that they just want to lean into these policies as being relatively popular and perhaps having more truck with winnable voters in the middle?
Well, Republicans won on one thing, and one thing you saw is the top issue or two in every poll that was done by Fox or anybody last year looked at immigration and border security as being right there at the top. That was an issue that President Trump ran on and won on, and thereby some Senate and House Republicans won on that issue too. So Democrats had a weakness there, regardless if it was going to be Biden or Harris as the nominee. So most of them saying, the proof is in the pudding. The idea that they won on this, they're willing to say, okay, let's lean into that still. The problem might start to be, and we hear some chatter about this from farm state Republicans, or those who represent agricultural areas, if they're coming in to get the workers or other industries, it might not even be agriculture, frankly. That's something that concerns them. A long time ago I had a conversation with Maria Elvira Salazar, who represents a district, mostly a Cuban district in South Florida. And she said, we want to get the bad guys out of it. Somebody with a criminal record, okay, and is a rapist or whatever their problem is, we want them out. But she said to me, the people who go in and clean the hotel rooms, the people who are here to get an education, the people who are here, who clean people's homes, et cetera. She said, yes, they're here illegally, but, we have to figure out, something else. At some point that dam might break here where some Republicans say, and there have been statistics on this, a lot of the people who've been picked up are not necessarily violent criminals. There was a fascinating case in terms of somebody who was arrested, an imam from Egypt who came to Cincinnati, had been a member of the clergy at one of the major hospitals in Cincinnati, and had claimed asylum when he came here, but somehow was on a foreign a watch list that concerned them. And they could never quite say why it was, and then when they picked him up, so no, he's on the list, but his immigration attorneys would never say. It's those types of controversial cases that might backfire in certain quarters of the Republican Party, whether it be somebody who is an ag worker, or as I say in this case, somebody who was allegedly seeking religious freedom and political persecution back in Egypt, trying to flee from that.
Last question for you. The situation regarding Jeffrey Epstein. Obviously, this is a kind of a story that was ignored by CNN and MSNBC for years and years, from my perspective.
Now
and
they're
they've
on
been
it,
devoting.
Right?
Yeah, now they're wall to wall, and obviously there's been controversy within Republican ranks around this story. What are you hearing from members about what they think ought to happen? And do they have a strong opinion, or are they just trying to kind of stay behind President Trump in terms of where they're putting themselves, or are they leaning more into the idea that there needs to be more transparency, more exposure of everything the government knows, et cetera?
Yeah, there's definitely a group of people who want to stay away from this, number one, because they just don't want any of that schism, to splinter the party. That's the first thing. But there is that group of folks, mostly very conservative members, who are like, hey, we campaigned on this. I had one member say this could cost us the midterms, that people were so energized about this. They were upset that President Trump and some other, podcasters and had said other things about this, say maybe it's time to move on or look the other way. They really worry about this because that fired up the base. There is overt criticism of Pam Bondi. You had Tim Burchett, the Republican congressman from Tennessee, who said that he liked Dan Bongino, but not necessarily was a fan of Pam Bondi. And there was a little bit of a split there, according to our David Spunt, covers the Justice Department. So yes, this is something they have to address. And so a lot of people were a little bit surprised when Mike Johnson made comments on a podcast that maybe they should, get to the bottom of this. And you have to remember that Mike Johnson has that narrow majority. He understands, what the idea of the motion to vacate means. He's had problems with some of these folks who've raised hackles about, Epstein. In this case, Lauren Boebert, certainly Marjorie Taylor Greene. Both have had spoken out against the speaker from time to time, especially Greene. And so, that's him playing his own internal in-house politics here on Capitol Hill. being very mindful of that. Although there was an effort, a bipartisan effort actually, to force the Justice Department to release all of these files, and that was something that was blocked by the overall House. And so some people said, is Mike Johnson talking out of one side of his mouth and then saying something else out of the other? That's a problem. And I think you're right. The Democrats, they see a potential wedge here where they can, splinter some of these folks. Now, it's not like, if they can somehow deliver the Epstein files, I mean, wouldn't that be ironic? And there's something in there, I don't know. But you have to remember that there is naturally a cohort of members and in the Republican Party or the MAGA coalition who, number one, I don't know that they would ever be satisfied by anything that was finally released. But number two, that there is a constituency for this. And this is why there's a task force that the Speaker set up, headed by Anna Paulina Luna, the Republican from Florida, to look into the JFK files. And they had some success. There was this report that came out the other day about the CIA knowing and having connections with Lee Harvey Oswald. What do they know about Martin Luther King? All of these types of things that would, show up on, I don't know, In Search Of by Leonard Nimoy, way back when. That's what they're into. And again, those things do have some merit because people have talked about these for years. They've talked about these things in political science classes. I remember the first time I really ever heard about the Kennedy assassination and had no idea about this conspiracy that he had been killed and everything else, or what went into that. So I think that that's what drives that, and they have to look at that in reality. Does that affect the midterms? I don't know, but it's a different type, I'll use the term again, cohort in the Republican Party that they have to be mindful of, or they risk alienating them. I don't know they go to the Democrats necessarily, but they aren't part of the MAGA coalition. It's easier to promise things when you're outside of office than when you get inside office, and I think that's a little bit what's happened to the Republicans and certainly with President Trump on this score.
Mm-hmm. It does seem to be something where, it's a dog caught the car kind of moment. Thanks so much, Chad, for taking the time to join me today on the Big Ben Show. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and as the most plugged-in guy on Capitol Hill, we really appreciate it.
When are you coming over for scotch? That is an open invitation.
At the earliest opportunity. I have a 4 and a 2-year-old, so any excuse that I can get to come over for scotch is a good one.
Well, I have 535 members of Congress, so I think that might outweigh a 4 and a 2-year-old, actually.
Fair point. Okay. Thanks so much, Chad. Really appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you.
We'll be back with more of the Big Ben Show right after this.
I go to one place, and that's Great Clips, because I can just go on the app.
How you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
Amazing.
I can see what the wait is. If the wait time is under 15 minutes, I just sign up, and then I can just drive there and walk right in and get right in the chair. This is what I'm looking for.
Okay, so
Just like a one, and then you fade it up.
Okay, you got it.
That sound good?
Sounds good.
Now I start just holding up a picture. I took a picture from one of the headshots from a Falcons game program, and I just say, "Can you do this?"
That is Kirk Cousins, America's national treasure from the Netflix quarterback series. And I don't know about you, Dylan, but I had multiple friends blowing up my phone with, have you seen this Kirk Cousins clip related to this haircut experience that he has, including the fact that he takes his own headshot from the Falcons program.
So funny.
In as a model. Dylan, do you go to Great Clips for your haircut?
I'm not a Great Clips guy, but I don't know if this is a national chain or if it's like a DMV chain, but I'm a hair cuttery guy.
Okay, you're a hair cuttery guy.
Yeah, I'm a hair cuttery guy.
That's fine. They're both good chains. Look, I think it's important to have a good relationship with a barber. I have a barber who I've been going to for quite some time. He's quick, he's efficient, etc. The only problem is he has some of the worst body odor of anybody that I ever have to be around. And so I always slightly dread the fact that I'm due for one because I'm going to have to sit next to this guy. But also you're trusting him with your hair, so you don't want to say, dude, try some medical deodorant instead of whatever it is you're using from Tom's. So
That's funny.
Let me just ask you this. When it comes to Kirk Cousins and this quarterback series, it's clear that, he's someone who is just fascinating for all of the different weird, quirky aspects of his character.
Yeah.
How he's inspired by Tom Petty to come back and win a game. They're playing Creed at one point, and it really motivates him. He requests Celine Dion and says, this is the song that I really love from her because it's in Sing 2, which is one of my favorite movies. That's a thing he says, unironically. How much do you appreciate Kirk Cousins, and do you believe that he should be an Indianapolis Colt?
Oh my gosh. Okay, that is a layered question. I love Kirk Cousins. I think my first incident of
isn't
loving
he perfect
Kirk,
for Indianapolis?
He's
He's
perfect
like
for
the perfect
Indy.
Indianapolis quarterback.
He kind of has some of that Phillip Rivers energy that we have, like that you like that moment from all those years ago.
Yep.
I
Also,
would love him in
fully
Indy.
dressed in Kohl's at all
Right,
times.
and the guy makes
the complete opposite of Joe Burrow wearing Bottega $12,000 jackets without a shirt.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I feel like he needs to be in Indianapolis.
He would fit in.
We need to manifest this.
He would fit in. I'm in. He
all
would
right.
be way better than what we
We are
got.
officially, as the Big Ben Show, we are officially endorsing the idea of Kirk Cousins needs to be traded to Indianapolis.
Let's go.
And it makes sense, man. Anthony is not going to make it through this season. He's never going to make it through a season.
Nope.
You have been listening to another edition of the Big Ben Show. We will be back next week with more to dive back into the fray.